Hello everyone, I am Pavani, optometrist. Hope you all are doing good. So today my topic is about intraocular pressure. Intraocular pressure is nothing but the fluid pressure which is present inside the eye. So the main functions of the intraocular pressure is it mainly helps to maintain the shape of the eyeball. Normal pressure of the intraocular pressure is in between 10 to 20 mm of Hg. So next comes the question is why do we need the intraocular pressure? Why is it so important? So the main function of the intraocular pressure is it helps to protect the shape of the eyeball. How does it maintain the shape? Say for example you are taking a balloon, okay? Take a balloon which is without air and take a balloon which is with air. Without air, the balloon doesn't contain any shape, right? So whenever you fill the air into the balloon, what happens? It will get a shape. Because you fill the air into the balloon gets the shape. How does it get the shape? The air inside the balloon will exert its pressure on the walls. Or as a result, you will get the shape for the balloon. In the same way, the intraocular pressure, the fluid also exerts some pressure on the walls of the eyeball. So if you take it as the eyeball, it exerts some pressure on the walls of the eyeball. As a result, it maintains the shape of the eyeball and also it helps to maintain the location of the structures of the eye like lens and retina at one particular place. That fluid is nothing but the aqueous humor as well as the vitreous humor. As we are talking about the intraocular pressure, today we will be discussing only about the aqueous humor. What happens if the pressure decreases in the eyeball? Eyeball shape will get collapsed. Because of this fluid only, all these parts will be located in that particular place. If at all, if there is no fluid, what happens? This lens and retina will be dislocated. Okay. So, mainly this fluid. So, mainly what happens? This fluid helps to maintain, say for example this is the retina, this fluid helps to keep the structures of the eyeball in place as well as it also provides the nutrition to the avascular structures in our eye, which is nothing but the lens and cornea. This is avascular, right? So these avascular structures will get the nutrition from the aqueous humor and this lens will get the nutrition from the aqueous humor as well as from the vitreous humor. So the main function of the aqueous humor is it helps in maintaining the shape of the eyeball. Because of this pressure only, the lens, the retina, the cornea, the outward protrusion of the cornea, everything will be in place because of the fluid pressure which is present inside the eyeball. If there is no fluid, what happens? The structures will collapse. Eyeball which lose its shape, at the same time the retina may get detached or it may get some folds on it. The lens will get dislocated. So all parts will not be in the place. So whatever the aqueous humor is produced, that should be drained out. At what pressure? The aqueous humor is getting circulated inside the eye. Based on that, you will get the intraocular pressure. The normal intraocular pressure is in between 10 to 20 mm of Hg. If the pressure is greater than 20 or 21 mm of Hg, we call it as higher intraocular pressure, which leads to glaucoma. In some cases, the intraocular pressure may decrease. That means it may go less than 8 mm of Hg. What happens if the intraocular pressure get decreased? The structures inside the eye will not be in place. The retina may get detached. The eyeball shape may get collapsed. So, when you talk about the composition of the aqueous humor, it is made up of 99% of the water. It also contains the electrolytes like sodium, potassium, chloride and bicarbonate. Apart from that, it contains amino acids, lactate, ascorbate, which is nothing but the vitamin C, and a low level of protein. That means the protein present in this aqueous humor is less than the protein which is present in the blood plasma. So the aqueous humor which is produced inside the eye is almost equal to the plasma. When you talk about the protein present in the plasma is greater than the protein which is present in the aqueous humor. So how is the aqueous humor produced? It is produced from the ciliary process of the ciliary body, which is present in the posterior chamber. From there it goes to the anterior chamber through pupil. From there, from the iridocorneal junction, through iridocorneal junction it goes to the trabecular meshwork. From there it goes to the canal of Schlem. From canal of Schlem, then it goes to rectal channels, and then it goes to the episcleral veins. From there it drains out to the systemic circulation. So the aqueous humor is produced at the ciliary process of the ciliary body, which is present in the posterior chamber of the eye. From there it goes to the anterior chamber through the pupil. From anterior chamber through the iridocorneal junction it drains out to the trabecular meshwork. From trabecular meshwork it goes to the canal of Schlem. From there it goes to the colectoral channel. Through aqueous veins it goes to the episcleral veins. From there it goes to the systemic circulation. So now let's go deeper into how the aqueous humor is formed. The production of the aqueous humor occurs mainly with the three steps of this mechanism. Okay, the first comes the ultrafiltration. Before going into the production of the aqueous humor, first let's go into how the ciliary body looks like. If at all, if this is your eye, here you will have iris, here you will have lens, and this is the ciliary body, right? So in this ciliary body, here you will have epithelial cells, stroma, and also the muscles. Okay, so from these projections the aqueous humor is produced. If you take only the diagram of the ciliary body, this is how it looks like. So this is the ciliary body. The mainly the ciliary body consists of ciliary muscles, ciliary stroma, and epithelial cells, which is pigmented epithelium, as well as it contains the non-pigmented epithelial cells. And in the stroma you will have the capillaries. From these capillaries only you will get the fluid into the stroma, and from the stroma this fluid will enter into the posterior chamber through the non-pigmented and pigmented epithelial cells. These non-pigmented epithelial cells will face the posterior chamber. From stroma this fluid will pass to the posterior chamber. So if you take it as the ciliary body, you will have the muscles. Apart from the stroma and epithelium, you will have the muscles also. One is the, this is the radial muscles, longitudinal muscles, and the circular muscles. Whatever the projections we see, this is nothing but the ciliary process. We call it as the ciliary process. From ciliary process the aqueous humor is produced, and then it enters into the anterior chamber. Okay, so let's go deeper into the mechanism. As I said that the first mechanism is ultrafiltration. Say for example, you are taking the coffee filter. When you take the coffee filter, what happens? Upper part, what you will do, you will put some coffee powder as well as the water, right? But when it reaches to the lower part, what happens? Only the fluid comes out. In the same way, imagine these capillaries acts as the coffee filter. The blood pressure inside the capillaries will be greater than that of the pressure which is required for the eye. For eye, how much pressure we need? It is around 10 to 20 mm of Hg, but the blood pressure which is present inside the capillaries is more. If at all that amount of pressure enters into the eye, what happens? Eye will not bear, right? So what does it do? These capillaries will filter out the fluid and some amount of molecules into the stroma. The fluid which comes from the capillaries is the ultra filtered fluid, and remember, but it does not pass the blood and proteins. It does not pass the blood and proteins into the stroma. These capillaries will filter only the fluid and some amount of molecules into the stroma. So in that way we will get the fluid into the ciliary stroma. So from there what happens? When the capillaries filter out the fluid and ions into the stroma, the ions like sodium, potassium, chloride will enter into the pigmented epithelial cells. From there it goes to the non-pigment epithelial cells. There these ions use the energy which is present in the cell and the ion exchange will happen. As a result, osmosis is created. From there, these ions go to the posterior chamber. As the osmosis is created, the fluid follows the ions and enters into the posterior chamber. This fluid enters into the posterior chamber through the special water channels called aquaporins, which are present in the non-pigment epithelial cells. So from these special water channels only, the water enters into the posterior chamber. So when the water enters into the posterior chamber, this water will get mixed up with the ions and then the aqueous humor is created. So this aqueous humor is created from the ciliary process of the ciliary body. So when the aqueous humor is produced, from where it comes? So this whole process from these projections, this is nothing but the ciliary process. Here you will have the non-pigmented epithelial cells. This is the stroma, and here you will have the muscles. Okay, stroma secretes some amount of ions, sodium, potassium, and that ions will be some ions, salts will be secreted in the epithelial and non-epithelial cells. So the fluid slowly comes into the posterior chamber, and here the fluid mixes up with the ions, and this aqueous humor from the posterior chamber will enter into the anterior chamber. Here it gets circulated and then it is drained from the iridocorneal junction to the trabecular meshwork, Schlemm's canal, to the episcleral veins. Quick flowchart here. First, the capillaries filter out the fluid and ions. These ions enters into the posterior chamber later, and here osmosis takes place. Because of the osmosis, the fluid follows the ions and enter into the posterior chamber. The fluid mixes with the ions and then aqueous humor is produced. From there it enters into the anterior chamber and drains out from the iridocorneal angle. From there it goes to the trabecular meshwork, Schlemm's canal, collected channels, episcleral veins. So it is important to remember, whatever amount the aqueous humor is produced, that much amount the aqueous humor should be drained out. Based on this, the intraocular pressure will be dependent. Okay, if at all if the aqueous humor doesn't drain properly, what happens? The pressure inside the eye increases and then it leads to glaucoma. Okay, so per minute 2.5 microliters of aqueous humor is produced continuously. Total volume of aqueous humor present inside the eye is around 0.3 ml. That should be drained out, produced and drained out continuously. Okay, only then the intraocular pressure will be maintained. If at all if it doesn't drain out, what happens? IOP increases, intraocular pressure increases, as a result it leads to glaucoma.